podcast. Schiff and Derek back here again, and
Mhm.
we had an exciting week so far. We still have one game left. Sorry we weren't able to get the previews for all of the rest of the games in for you guys. We had a couple of things come up.
Mhm.
As you guys know, things happen, as is life. But today we're going to go over the Thursday and Friday night games for you guys, starting off with the Ravens going into Arrowhead, taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. Honestly, really exciting, real nail biter of a game.
Yeah.
Came down to, I mean, literally, when people say football is a game of inches, this game showed why. If Isaiah Likely's cleats were a size smaller,
Yeah, literally.
this game might have ended differently. And granted,
Yeah.
Harbaugh was going to go for two, so the Ravens were either going to win or lose on the next play. There was no in between. It
Yeah.
wasn't going to overtime. So that's neither here or there. That's not what we're here to talk about. What we're here to talk about is the stats and what happened in fantasy football in this game. And honestly, it was quite a lot. A lot of people probably watched this game, first game of the season, and immediately hit the panic button right after.
Yeah.
Reason being was, I mean, first off, let's start off with Lamar Jackson. Had himself a great day.
Yeah.
As far as fantasy goes, I mean, he was 26 for 41, 273 yards and a touchdown. Little did we know then that'd be one of the best quarterback lines of the week,
Yeah.
but also rushed 16 times for 122 yards. Lost a fumble, but in reality, I think with Lamar Jackson, something that we're going to be looking at this season is a lot more off schedule stuff than we saw last year. The line is not what it was last year. There's
Mhm.
a lot of rotating pieces. They had guys going in and out. That fumble actually came on Roger Rosengarten's first play of his NFL career. Chris Jones saw that the rookie went in, decided to line up on him as any Hall of Fame D tackle would do,
Yeah.
punishes him, sacks Lamar, gets the sack. So that's going to be something that until they kind of solidify an offensive line, that interior, especially, yes, they have the center, Linderbaum, who's great, but those two guards are going to be rotating for a little bit. And until that gets solidified, granted, not every team has as good a pass rush as the Chiefs, but that's going to be one weakness. And it's going to cause Lamar to run a bit more, as we saw some of the
Mhm.
off schedule stuff like that touchdown to Isaiah Likely. It's going to be more of the vintage Lamar, I guess we kind of
Yeah.
know and love, as for fantasy at least.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, Lamar's going to Lamar. Um, that was that.
Yeah.
Moving on to the running back room, excuse me. I'm sure a lot of people were very uncomfortable after the first drive of this game.
Mhm.
Because in the first drive, Derrick Henry touched the ball 5 times. You know, they go down the field, march it down. He gets the touchdown, and it's like, great, this is what we wanted, Derrick Henry on the Ravens. Well, one thing that people have to realize, Justice Hill has been the third down back for this team for a while.
Mhm.
When the game script changes and the Ravens are playing from behind or, against the Kansas City Chiefs, one of the fastest offenses in the league, you got to take a step back and kind of look at the big picture, understand that they're going to use Justice Hill a bit more in those situations. Now, when they're trying to salt the game away, when they have a lead, you're going to see a lot of Derrick Henry, and he's going to get a lot more than 13 attempts.
Yeah.
So he finished with 13 attempts for 46 yards. He had two targets, but didn't catch either one of them. They weren't the best targets, anyways. So, I mean, that's kind of what we're going to expect out of Derrick Henry. It's going to be, reliant on volume, which he will get, but volume and touchdowns, he's not going to catch a whole lot of passes, as we knew. Justice Hill, as I was talking about, had an extremely efficient day on the ground. Was Oh, no, I'm sorry. On the ground, he was only 1 for 3. He had an extremely efficient day through the air,
Yeah.
caught 6 of 8 targets for 52 yards. So he was a bit more of a factor in a fantasy setting. Not that anybody was starting Justice Hill unless you're in some crazy deep or dynasty type setting.
Yeah.
But as we know, he is valuable to a certain degree. If Derrick Henry were to ever go down, we know the Ravens love Justice Hill. They kept him over Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins.
Mhm.
So, I mean, moving forward, not panicking with Derrick Henry. Not like, oh, well, this Justice Hill got 54% of the running back snaps and Derrick Henry got 46.
Mm-hmm.
It was week 1, we move on. That's not something I'm looking too much into this week, like moving into the tight end room. A lot of people, this was probably what people hit the panic button on most. They saw the usage from Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. That being said, Mark Andrews still was on the field 74% of the time, saw 59 snaps on that offense, and Isaiah Likely was out there for 53, 66% of the snaps. So, a big thing that a lot of people probably, either didn't see, doesn't matter. What they saw was the stat line: 2 catches for 14 yards,
Mm-hmm.
totaling a whopping 3.4 fantasy points if you are playing PPR. If not, 1.4 or 2.4. Mm, Awful. Awful start to the season. We know that. But the Chiefs were also bracketing Mark Andrews all game. He got
Yeah.
2 targets. There's a reason for that. There's a reason why Isaiah Likely got 12 targets. He was open in kind of the short little intermediate area. And like I said, Lamar was playing off schedule a lot. So he was just there. That being said, I don't think this is just a one off thing for Isaiah Likely. I think they're going to be running a lot of 12 personnel throughout this year. I mean, you look at the wide receiver usage. Zay Flowers played 71 snaps. Rashad Bateman played 67. The next closest was Nelson Aguilar at 30. Aguilar's not talented enough to keep Likely off the field, and the Ravens like using their tight ends. I
Yeah.
expect a lot of 12 personnel. I think Mark Andrews will be fine, but I think Isaiah Likely is going to be a relevant piece of this offense throughout the year. I don't think this is just a one-off thing where it's like, it's just, no, he is talented, and they are going to use him. And I believe that's the reason why they didn't improve in the wide receiver room.
Yeah.
Going to the wide receivers, we had, I mean, Zay Flowers kind of a lot of what we saw last. I mean, there are the deep targets here and there, but a lot of it's short and intermediate stuff. Got 10 targets. We love that. Caught 6 of them for 37 yards. Not the best day, but still, we know he's going to have an involvement. And outside of apparently Isaiah Likely, Zay Flowers is his favorite target. Next was Rashad Bateman, who, there's been talk all off season, like, oh, Rashad, this is the year, da 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 da. I mean, it's been you draft a guy that high, there's always going to be hope throughout the career when they don't hit. But he played his role well in this game, I'd say. He had one pretty bad holding call that called back a big penalty or called back a big play,
Yeah.
but he had an extremely clutch catch like late in the fourth quarter that set up that goal line. I guess you could call it a goal line stand from the Chiefs. The clock just ran out, but he set him up there. Caught both 2 of his 5 passes for 53 yards. Um, I think he is the wide receiver too. It's not saying too much on an offense that if we don't expect to throw the ball too much to their wide receivers. But I guess really deep league, somebody that you could look at. He's just out there. He's going to be involved. And as far as Justin Tucker missed a long field goal, still hit 2 of 3,
Yeah.
both extra points, ended with 8 points. And as far as the Ravens, I mean, that's like about it that I have to talk about.
Yeah. I had kind of like a triple-sided question. You already answered one of the three. The other two that a lot of people are probably wondering right now is you already answered Isaiah Likely probably going to be at least a decently big part of this offense. He's on the field, they're going to
Yeah.
use him. The other two sides of it, if you're playing a traditional league and say you're first to third on the waiver, what's left on the waiver or what is available on the waiver after week 1, Isaiah Likely for a lot of people is probably going to be towards the top of the list of people to look at. One, would you give up your spot in traditional waiver wire as like the 1 or 2 on that waiver wire to get Isaiah Likely? And then 2, if you're playing fab like we play and say your budget's 200 fab, what's an
Yeah.
amount of fab you would feel comfortable using on a player like Isaiah Likely after only 1 week? You know he's going to get bid on, but what would you feel comfortable using?
Realistically, I just look at the way that my team is set up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not. entirely, like I said, I'm not looking at Isaiah Likely necessarily as someone that I could just use as a backup tight end, or it was kind of the way we talked about Evan Ingram a bit in the
Mm-hmm.
pre-draft, all of our pre-draft stuff. It's kind of the way that I view Isaiah Likely. Now, he's a decent flex option in my opinion. Kind of, I mean, yeah, we'll have to see like as the weeks go, but like I said, the way that I don't think that they're going to just stop using him. I
Yeah.
think he's going to see work every single week and consistent work at that. So I do like going after him. However, there's just some of the other injuries that happen. I mean, say you have Jake Ferguson, MCL injury.
That's
Then
yeah.
I'm more inclined, or David Njoku who got hurt.
Mm-hmm.
If your tight end actually got hurt, then I'm a little more inclined to go out and like make that happen. However, if I don't, you have to take a look at how the rest of the top 10 tight ends, top 12 tight ends performed this week.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't good. I mean, I played against Mark Andrews in one league, had Kincaid in another, had Mark Andrews in one, played Kincaid in another. And I was like, oh, well,
It's a wash.
it's, and then I wasn't, you just go down the list, go
Yeah.
down the line, look at all the, Kelsey had a bad game,
Yeah.
Kincaid, McBride, Evan Ingram. And it was just, so it's like, I'm not really hitting the, no one had an advantage over anyone at tight end this week. So I'm just moving on to the next week, really. I'm not freaking out too much. If you can go out and make that happen, sure. But I just think it's a little too early, given there's still going to be that like wide receiver or running back that ends up popping up that
Yeah.
will probably have a bit more value throughout the rest of the year.
Yeah.
So maybe like 5-10% of your fab. Um, and if you need a tight end, I'd give up your waiver priority. But
Yeah.
otherwise,
No, and that's fair. I had a feeling a lot of people were going to have that question, especially the people that had, a Jake Ferguson and a Joku. So I thought it was a good idea to cover, but I definitely agree
well,
with your
yeah. And
answer.
as you know, week one panic meters highest it will be for
Oh,
the
yeah.
whole entire year.
Oh, yeah. And for the Chiefs side of the ball, Mahomes he had a solid football game fantasy wise. He wasn't the greatest, but again, it's weird. It's almost like if you had pieces of a couple games this week, you could have hit really big, but a lot of games, a lot of players that were being drafted very high kind of didn't perform, at least to what we thought they would. But Mahomes goes 20 for 28. He throws 291 yards, a touchdown, an interception. Had 3 yards on the ground on 2 carries. Finished with 16.14 fantasy points, which is currently the QB 12. So it puts him outside that top 10. I expect obviously better weeks for Mahomes. He did go against the Ravens defense. There's not many defenses he will face this season that are better than the Ravens. And especially week one. Obviously, Mahomes is a guy you throw him in at your quarterback and you don't even think about moving him anywhere else. The same with Pacheco. We see that Clyde Edwards is out kind of indefinitely currently, so we'll just have to see how that plays out. But he's got no real threat in that backfield. He played 80% of the snaps, saw 15 carries for 45 yards. He got in the end zone. He was targeted 3 times. He caught 2 of those for 33 yards.
Oh, and if he caught that,
Yeah.
bro, just
Mm-hmm.
regardless of the fact that it was against the Ravens, the game's over. I could talk about it objectively now. If he had caught that, I don't know why Mahomes threw it like he was throwing to Kelsey. You're throwing to a running back,
Yeah.
but oh, that wasn't.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to.
No, it's
Oh,
it's yeah, it's understandable because he finishes the running back 18 with 15.8 fantasy points, but yeah, a lot of finishes. It's always just like one play that could have gone either way that could make a big difference. But Pacheco has a solid week. The only other running back that even really saw the field enough to even talk about is P. Ryan, but he only saw 15% of snaps, no carries. He was targeted twice, caught one for 10 yards. He's not going to spell Pacheco at all in that backfield. He's just going to play a couple plays when Pacheco needs a break, as long as Pacheco's healthy. Um, the clear wide receiver one is Rashee Rice. He was targeted 9 times. He caught 7 of those for 103 yards, 17.3 fantasy points. He played 78% of the snaps. And we knew, even with Hollywood when he comes back, it's going to be Rashi's wide receiver room. Xavier Worthy, they were able to get him involved with the usage that they used him. He was only targeted 3 times, but he caught 2 of them for 47 yards and a touchdown. He also had a carry for 21 yards and a touchdown. So he technically leads them in fantasy points with 20.8. He played 63% of the snaps, but on a consistent basis, Rashi's going to get the volume. Xavier Worthy, like somewhat trying to mimic what they used to do with Tyreek Hill. He's going to be your big play guy, kind of your splash, but on a week in and week out basis, Rashi's going to be your guy there. The only other receiver to catch a pass was good old Justin Watson, who caught his lone target for 25 yards. Had to shout him out because he will not go away ever. The tight end room, just like Mark Andrews. Travis Kelce played 89% of snaps, was only targeted 4 times, caught 3 of them for 34 yards, 6.4 fantasy points. And I know, again, yeah, we're not hitting panic button on any of these guys, but it's something we talked about, at least in our pre-draft analysis, was I don't necessarily want to reach 2-3 rounds ahead of the rest of the tight ends and get a Travis Kelce when you can wait and get some of the young and up-and-coming tight ends. And again, it's only week 1. It's the Ravens. They could have had, the same idea on defense as the Chiefs did with Mark Andrews. But again, Travis Kelce's a guy, if you drafted him, he stays in your lineup no matter what. It just felt weird that Noah Gray technically outscored him. He caught all 3 of his targets for 37 yards. He had 6.7 fantasy points. He's just one of those guys. We always talk about Noah Gray. He's a guy that'll randomly get in the end zone when you need it from one of the guys that should be in the end zone. He'll always be involved.
And not to honestly to note on that, in all reality, he did just sign a 3-year extension with the Chiefs.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, hey,
He's not going anywhere. Yeah, Noah Gray will be a part of the offense. Just obviously not the biggest piece, but he will always have a couple looks every game. And then rounding it out,
it might
Butker.
be a good dynasty stash too.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah,
Honestly.
if Kelsey did happen to miss time, yeah, I agree with that.
And then I just wanted to touch on one thing with the Rice and Kelsey. A
Mm-hmm,
lot of because I listen to a few different fantasy podcasts. One I really like is the Fantasy Footballers. Shouts out to them.
mm-hmm,
But one thing that was mentioned was a lot of the targets that Kelsey gets happen to be in the same area of the field where Rashi Rice receives a lot of his targets. That kind of over the middle, intermediate. It's where they do their damage. So not to be said that both of them can't have a good game at the same time, but it's more likely that if one of them is going off, the other might not be eating so much. So I think it might be a bit of a back and forth thing with them. Maybe, not so drastic like 6 points in 17, but I think it'll just be more of a back and forth thing with them because they kind
yeah,
of work around the same spot on the field.
yeah. No, that's fair, and I mean that's really it. Again, Butker gets 9 points. The defense gets 5. It's week 1. It was.
We didn't expect the defenses to, yeah.
It's 2 very good teams. It's a tough matchup to even want either of those defenses for this, but that takes us internationally to Brazil, where the Packers played the Eagles in another really good game. The Thursday and Friday night games were very good. They were very
We
close.
had they planned it well, started well. Good job, NFL. It
Yeah.
was a good start to the season, the first 2 days at least.
Yeah, it was 2 very good games. The Packers ended up
The
losing
first two.
34-29 to the Eagles. Jordan Love had a solid fantasy day. He went
Mm.
17 for 34 through 260 yards, 2 touchdowns and interception, 17.4 fantasy points before getting injured on the second to last play of the entire game. And they have said it is his knee. As of an hour ago, Jordan Love is not going to be placed on the IR. That is confirmed. So
It's good to hear. It
we
means it's not going to be Malik Willis for the next 4 weeks.
and I hope it's one of those they
No,
haven't.
that's huge.
You know, for sure. And they haven't ruled out Jordan Love for next week. I would be very surprised to see him play next week, to be honest, after the injury. I think it may be a week or two, but again, we'll see as the week progresses. Um, the Packers, without question, need Jordan Love on the field. If it is Malik Willis, that offense as a whole will take a giant plummet.
Yeah, and they do play at home next week, but against the Colts, and
Yeah,
I don't believe Malik Willis will them to a victory.
no,
So
no, it could
yeah,
be rough going. But we'll cover it more in our previews as we get closer to next week. But this
oh yeah.
Packers team, the guys we were starting produced. Josh Jacobs played 73% of the snaps. He had 16 carries for 84 yards. He saw 3 targets out of the backfield, caught 2 of them for 20 yards, finished with 12.4. And against the Eagles, I actually really liked the finish from Josh Jacobs. I genuinely didn't mind it. It's one of those where he didn't get in the end zone and he finished with 12.4. If he gets in the end zone and that's 18.4, we're saying it's an amazing week. So I genuinely do not mind that finish from Josh Jacobs. He played most of the snaps. It's obviously going to be his backfield. Um, when Emmanuel Wilson came in, he was very efficient. He only played 24% of snaps, and in that limited time, had 46 yards on 4 carries, caught 2 of his 3 targets for only 2 yards, 6.8 fantasy points. He's an interesting handcuff. I know Marshawn Lloyd has been out. When he comes back, we'll have to see what happens. But Emmanuel Wilson, if you have Josh Jacobs, I do not mind holding him in deeper leagues as a handcuff because I think he could be a solid player for any weeks if you would need him. Jaden
No,
Reed.
yeah, and it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much. We already see CMC missing the first week, so those handcuffs are important, guys.
Yeah. No, they absolutely are. Um, the Packers wide receiver room, dude, I will never figure out their wide receiver room. I think one thing we know is Jaden Reed is your explosion guy. He's your big play guy. He's the one that's going to make.
I think I feel comfortable calling Jaden Reed the wide receiver one because they legitimately go out and like manufacture
Yeah.
touches for him.
Yeah.
Like they go out and they're like, there's plays where it's like, we're not going to leave the option of you making it, we're giving the ball to Jaden Reed.
Yeah.
I think he is the most talented wide receiver on that team. He's by far the fastest, but
Yeah. No.
I don't know. So I just like as far as a comfortability standpoint and a week to week basis, well, that was when they had their starting quarterback for sure playing every week.
Yeah.
Jaden Reed is the guy that I
No, for
rolling
sure.
with as the wide receiver one there.
They're the only thing with the Packers. They're a weird one where I agree. Jaden Reed's by far the wide receiver one, fantasy wise, and probably just regular football wise. But their time on the field for the Packers, they're one of the few teams where just because one wide receiver's on the field the longest and plays the most snaps doesn't necessarily mean that they're their number one there. It's just a weird dynamic. But Jaden Reed gets 6 targets, catches 4 of them for 138 yards and a touchdown. His one rush on the ground was for 33 yards and a touchdown. 33.1 fantasy points, played 72% of snaps. Christian Watson sees 5 targets in comparison to Jaden Reed's 6, catches 3 of them for 13 yards and gets in the end zone. 10.3 fantasy points. He played 63% of the snaps. And Romeo Dobbs actually played the most snaps, 87%. Saw the most targets, 7. So right now, Dobbs with 7, Reed with 6, Christian Watson with 5. And Dobbs catches 4 of them for 50 yards, 9 fantasy points. So again, it's just weird. All their targets are very similar. I don't think we're going to see many games where one guy's getting an insane amount more than the others. But like Schiff mentioned, how they draw up the plays and what Jaden Reed is able to do with his targets is just unmatched for the Packers. He's the playmaker there for sure. Um,
I honestly view this Packers like it's like almost like that Office meme, like they're the same picture with the Texans. It's
Yeah.
just not as sexy on paper because the names aren't as like. But to me, it's like the same thing. It's like when they have their quarterback
Hmm.
out there, he can provide a decent fantasy day for any of the three guys. And it's at the point, it's like, okay, I feel comfortable with Diggs, Collins, and Dell. I'm pretty well. Again, it's Jordan Love. If he's out on the field, I feel
Yeah.
the same way about that Packers wide receiver room
Yeah. No, I
going forward.
completely agree. And the wide receiver that gets left out, Dontavion Wicks, he only played 46%. I think he's very talented. They just have an extremely young and talented wide receiver room. But he's the one that, got left out in this week. He was targeted 3 times, didn't have a catch, so he finished with 0. And kind of a surprise was the tight ends. Luke Musgrave was very solid for them last year, but so was Tucker Kraft. And come week 1, it was Tucker Kraft. That was appeared to be their starting tight end. He played 96% of snaps, only saw 3 targets, caught 2 of them for 37 yards, 5.7. But Luke Musgrave only saw 25% of the snaps, did not catch either of his 2 targets, so he finished with 0. And their kicker, Braden Narvison, finishes with 10 fantasy points. It's only funny because he'd made 2 very short field goals and he lines up for like, I think it was 48 or 49 yards. And we're watching it. And I literally say, I'm like, this is a guy that I see getting cut. Like, I just don't see him lasting an NFL season. And then the first real field goal he takes, he misses. We got rid of Anders Carlson for this, man. It is what it is. I got to lay off him. He's a rookie, but he did get 10 fantasy points. The defense got you 7 if you did happen to start them. And that was it. The Packers came up short. If Malik Willis has to play football for them, I will pray for anyone that has any Packers stock that they were
Well, I
planning
think
on
we'll see a
starting.
lot of Josh Jacobs.
Yes. Yes. You're only going to see Josh Jacobs.
I think we'll see a lot of Josh Jacobs. But yeah, um, it hurts watching Jordan Love go down in week 1 like that.
Yeah, man.
I've
It's
had
always
I have
me.
Packers stock across the board, all over different teams. Really liked just that team and all the skill positions this year, so it really does suck to see.
Mm-hmm.
Going to the other side of the ball, though, Jalen Hurts had a wild ride of a day.
Mm-hmm.
It was really, truly all over the place. He was 20 for 34, 278 yards, 2 touchdowns, also threw 2, may I say, horrible interceptions.
Yeah.
They were bad. There were parts of this game where Jalen Hurts looked bad.
Yeah.
So that I'm just, not going to harp on that, just putting that out there. But also had 13 carries for 33 yards and lost a fumble.
Yeah.
Um, hey, one thing that I said coming now, granted, 18.4 fantasy points is not a horrible day.
Yep.
It's not. But just if you look at, kind of the like Lamar and Josh Allen, and you drafted Jalen, and he didn't even get you 24. But it's kind of what I was saying. The whole not having Jason Kelsey thing. Saw some issues with the center, and they actually, I think, on their first attempt at a tush push, they got stopped. But most of all, the reason why I saw this just Jalen Hurts world beating fantasy quarterback not really being a thing this year was the one and only Saquon Barkley coming over to the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah.
If you played against him like I did, um, yeah, I'm pouring one up with you. It hurt. It
Yeah.
did. 24 attempts for 109 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground. Through the air, caught both of his targets for 23 yards and another touchdown.
Yeah.
Yes, a hat trick in his first game as an Eagle.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, they knew what they were doing. They went out and paid the man. Yeah. God, that one hurt. 33.2 fantasy points in his first game in
Yeah.
green. So I remember we were talking about. So one thing through the first week, there have been like 33 passing touchdowns and on average like 200 passing yards. So if you went out and got a Saquon,
Mm-hmm.
high, obviously you reaped the benefits this week because running backs outperformed a lot of receivers. But yeah, just Saquon had he really did low key single handedly beat me, but so I'm a little salty there. But it happened. We're moving on. Saquon Barkley is going to be great this year.
He's
Just
finally on a
get
good
used to
team.
it.
It's scary.
We gotta get used to it. It is very scary.
Yeah.
Another guy who's back to just being his old dominant self is Arthur Brown Jr. 10 targets, caught five of them for 119 yards and a touchdown.
Why did you say that
AJ
man's
Brown,
name?
baby.
That's crazy. He is
AJ
though.
Brown
He is.
back to his wide receiver one self doing AJ Brown things,
Yeah.
22.9 fantasy points. I mean, you gotta love it. Um, but also Devontae Smith had himself a game too. Caught seven of his eight targets for
Mm-hmm.
84. Didn't hit pay dirt, but still 15.4 points in the first game. And I mean, hey, if you would have told me going into this one that, and I mean, we said obviously you're starting Saquon, you're starting Devontae, you're start. That one had to feel good though.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
um, as we talked about, that I mean, I guess Dallas Goedert had a better game than a lot of tight ends did. Had five targets, caught four of them for 31 yards. He is going to. The thing with Godare is just always whether or not he could stay healthy. Because when he is, he's an involved part of the offense, but he just hasn't been on the field a lot in the past 2 years. So it's been kind of tough to trust him to any degree. But if he can remain, you know, healthy and involved, he'll be a solid streaming option at the tight end position.
Yeah.
Um, Not really too much else to talk about in the way the Eagles. Jake Elliott did typical Jake Elliott things: 2 for 2 on field goals, hit all four extra points, 10 fantasy points. Um, yeah, I mean, football is back, baby. We're about to go watch the Niners and Jets. I really don't know what to think about this game with no CMC. Aaron Rodgers' first game back.
Bold
It'll be interesting.
prediction: the Jets win. Bold prediction.
Uh, yeah, I mean, it could be bold, but the Jets have it's just it wouldn't surprise me too much because we saw the Niners fall to a Browns team that's built almost like, and the
Yeah.
Browns did not have Aaron Rodgers at quarterback at that time.
Yeah.
So I just and with no CMC, the Jets really could easily win this game.
Yeah.
But that'll be all for us for
Mm-hmm.
this one. Got a whole lot to talk about in the next one. A
Yeah.
lot of big surprises and even bigger letdowns. So we'll be back. We'll be
Yeah.
hopefully a little bit happier in the next.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
Yeah, both of our teams lost this week, so
Yeah.
it is what it is. We move on. Week one is week one, almost in the books. But as you guys know, like every single time, thank you once again for showing up, being here with us. Any suggestions that you guys may have that you'd like to see us do, or
Mm-hmm.
anything you got like players you want to hear about, anything at all, just leave a message in the comments. You know where to find us on Instagram and X, I guess we call it now. But
Yeah.
with all that, come back next time, guys. Take more reps with the first team.
Yes, sir.